In today's video, where have condo prices fell the most within the GTA? What areas are bouncing back a bit? That and much more. Hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Remax Realtron Realty Inc. As always, back with another video for you guys here today. As always, my contact information is in the description box and on the screen. If you have any further questions that arise during this video, feel free to get in touch with me with your contact info. Lastly, if you happen to be new to the channel or a returning viewer and you enjoy this type of content, Toronto real estate market trends and news, building reviews, buyer advice, seller advice, tenancy laws, and so much more, feel free to just support the channel a bit and subscribe and leave a like. It really helps. Anyways, enough of all that important yet annoying self-promotion. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of today's video, which is the Toronto and GTA condo market. Now, where the condo market is a little bit different than the overall housing market, particularly with regards to freeholds so far in 2022, is for most areas, not all, but for most areas, condos actually peaked in March. Whereas with freehold properties, particularly detached and maybe even some semis and townhomes, they happen to peak more so in February. So it's not that vast of a difference, just a month. But when we actually sit down and take a look at the numbers, we see that peak market conditions for most GTA areas occurred in March as opposed to February. So we're going to be taking a look at peak market conditions in 2022 versus the most recent month we have in full, which is July. And I wanted to see which areas have fallen the most and which areas are performing better than expected. Starting out with the GTA at large, the GTA at large is down 11% with regards to average condo prices since peak market conditions in March of 2022. The average in March across all areas in the GTA, of course, and across all condo types, which is the same criteria for all numbers going forward, was $808,000 in March of 2022. Now, in July of 2022, that average is all the way down to $719,000. But let's start breaking it down by area. And I'm probably sure a lot of you want to know which areas are performing the worst, because unfortunately, that is what sells the most. You know, I do a video where I talk about how certain property types are performing better than expected, and some positive news, it gets very little views. I put out a video talking about how things are in a dire situation, thousands of views. Anyways, enough of that. Which areas are performing the worst? And here there is no contest whatsoever. It's simply Peel region, primarily Brampton and Mississauga condos. Peel overall is down 15% since peak market conditions, where the average for a Peel condo in March of 2022 was $729,000. Now that average is all the way down to $616,000. For Mississauga, we see a fall in averages from $735,000 all the way down to $628,000. That is a 14% drop, obviously lower than the Peel overall, but still pretty dire and still one of the highest, the third highest. Where things are simply the worst is for Brampton condos, where the average prices have fallen all the way from $688,000 down to $561,000. That is nearly an 18.5% drop. And this is actually where the trends do not depart from the freehold side of things, because although freehold prices, as I said earlier in the video, did not peak in March, they peaked in February. Nonetheless, when we do the same exercise, detached properties, for instance, we see that Peel represents the largest drops from peak market conditions. Mississauga and Brampton follow suit in terms of freehold, as they have been doing in condos, clearly. And this used to be the case with Durham, where I can easily say Durham is the area within the GTA that has corrected the most, particularly Oshawa. Whitby and Pickering have held up better in Durham context. Nonetheless, Durham overall, a couple of months into the rate hikes, was where we thought, okay, according to the numbers, this is where things have corrected the most. Peel region by far has seen the largest correction in terms of prices, in terms of terminations, in terms of relists, in terms of sales. for both condos and freehold. Enough of the negative stuff, which obviously will cause a lot of you to leave this video. But for those who are sticking around for the positive stuff, which other areas are maybe performing a little bit better within context and maybe making sort of a recovery? Well, that is where downtown Toronto comes into play, particularly downtown C1, where it may not seem like good news because from peak market conditions, prices are down $100,000 in downtown C1. Where in downtown C1, prices have actually started crawling back a bit. Month over month, downtown Toronto condo prices are up 2%. In June of 2022, the average sold prices were $790,000. In July of 2022, the average sold prices are $808,000. 808, but no heartbreaks. Nonetheless, I'm not going to conceal anything. From the peak market condition perspective, things are somewhat still dire for downtown, wherein the average sold prices in peak market was around $891,000. As of June, that was going to be a $100,000 drop in average sold prices. Of course, now things, once again, as I just covered, have crawled back above the $800,000 price point. And many of you might say, well, where's the positive in this? It's still down nearly $100,000. Well, when we look at the major areas, downtown Toronto is the only area, particularly with, once again, C1, that is actually up month over month from June. By the way, if you do not know what these treb codes indicate, C1, C8, all these numbers, feel free to find the treb maps in the description box or subscribe to my newsletter. Now, putting aside downtown, Toronto overall from peak market is down 10%, wherein the average sold price Toronto-wide was $831,000 for condo. Now for Toronto condos, according to Toronto Condo Market in July of 2022, the average was $744,000. And if we were to segment Toronto between Toronto West, Toronto Central, Toronto East, Toronto West being primarily the Humber area, Etobicoke, Toronto East being primarily Scarborough, Toronto Central primarily being Toronto Central. The main arteries of Toronto Central you can think of, for instance, as Bathurst, Yonge, and Bayview, give or take, right? That's not an exact science, but mostly. Toronto Central is still down about 9.6% from peak market, whereas though Toronto West and Toronto East down 13% and 12.5% respectively. And quickly taking a look at York Region, York Region is the middling between Peel, which is the worst case scenario, and Toronto, which has been the best case scenario, where York Region still is down 13%, falling from an average of $791,000 for York Region condos, according to the York Region Condo Market in March, all the way down to July 2022, where the average was $687,000. Now, going forward, of the areas we have discussed, if we were to say which of these areas on a large scale, perspective, right? Because when it comes down to it, when I work with buyers, it's really about the particular case, right? I have to sit down with the buyer, think about whether they're an investor or end user, what their finances are like, what their, criteria is like, what their goals is like. But anyways, on a more macro outlook, I would probably have to say without a doubt that the best buy low opportunities of the areas discussed today is York Region, because I do believe York Region has more to offer, particularly with Richmond Hill and Markham, for potential buyers in the coming years than Mississauga and Brampton. Not to say there aren't really good areas in Mississauga that I'm a big fan of, there are, but I do believe Richmond Hill and Markham have more to offer and have a higher ceiling in terms of how much they can retain value and grow value for condo buyers. So even though you're buying lower in Brampton and Mississauga, I do believe Richmond Hill, Markham, and to a lesser extent, Vaughan, have more room to grow. Anyways, as always, if you have any further questions about topics discussed in this video, feel free to get in touch with me. My contact information in the description box and on the screen as well. Feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Feel free to also check out my Google reviews. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, stay tuned, and see you later.